Okay, so something really big just dropped. A potential arms deal that is, well, it's absolutely staggering in scale. Imagine a country agreeing to supply up to 150 top-tier fighter jets.
150.
Yeah, that's what's being discussed right now between Sweden and Ukraine. It's this huge long-term commitment that could, reshape the future of air defenses over there.
It's really not just about the planes themselves, is it? It's more about shifting priorities, the long game.
Exactly. Welcome to the military point. And hey, before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know. So our deep dive today is unpacking this meeting, the one that happened October 22nd, 2025, in Linköping, Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
You had Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy meeting with the Swedish PM Ulf Kristersson. And it wasn't just like a quick handshake. They went to the Saab plant, where they actually make the Gripen fighter jets.
Right, the home of the Gripen.
And they signed this formal letter of intent. It's all about long-term cooperation on air defenses.
And that scale, the sheer volume of what they talked about, that's what just immediately jumps out. When those numbers started circulating, potentially 100, maybe even 150 new Gripen E jets, well, you realize this isn't your typical military aid package. For Sweden, think about it. Traditionally neutral, this would be their biggest aircraft export order ever.
Ever, yeah.
It signals a massive industrial shift and a political alignment that, frankly, I don't think many people expected to see put down in numbers quite so starkly.
That number 150, it's absolutely massive. It just tells the whole story right there.
Yeah.
And Zelensky was very clear, wasn't he? He basically said Ukraine expects the final contract to cover no less than 100 of these advanced jets.
No less than 100.
It's a huge commitment, like rebuilding their entire air force around a single European platform.
But okay, here's where the tension kind of starts to creep in, and this is important for you, the listener, to really grasp. The document they signed, it's a letter of intent. It's not a final contract.
Big difference.
Huge difference. And Kristersson, the Swedish PM, he was pretty careful with his words about the timeline. He acknowledged, yes, they're committed to exploring all the possibilities, but then he immediately followed up with, it's a long road ahead of us.
That kind of language. Long road ahead.
Yeah, that suggests there's some pretty significant friction points still to work out.
And that friction, that long road, it really brings up the main question we want to dig into here.
Right.
Why is Ukraine making this enormous, potentially decades-long commitment to the Gripen right now?
Especially now.
Yeah, they've only just started the process of getting American F-16s integrated. Why suddenly pivot and make this the priority?
Well, I think it really speaks to the strategic thinking on Ukraine's side. When Zelensky calls the Gripen a priority, he mentions two key things. Money, about maneuvers.
Money and maneuvers, okay.
Yeah. The maneuvers part, that's the technical edge. We'll definitely get into that. But the money part, that connects directly to supply chain security and the long-term costs. If you choose a secure European industrial base like Saab in Sweden, arguably that helps shield them from, the political winds and the potential constraints that sometimes come with huge U.S. aid packages.
Huh. That's a really interesting angle. It's not just the jet itself, it's the reliability of the supplier over the next, 10, 20 years.
Exactly.
And we know Ukrainian pilots have already been over in Sweden actually testing the jet.
They have.
Which suggests they saw something technically really compelling, enough to make them say, okay, this Gripen E, this is what we need to prioritize, even over other options.
And this is where we get that aha moment looking at the air warfare analysis that's come out. The Gripen E, it's a very different kind of aircraft compared to the F-16, or certainly the high-end American F-35. The experts are calling it a rugged and relatively low-cost option.
Okay, rugged and low cost.
But, and this is crucial, it's also described as a significantly more capable medium-weight fighter than pretty much anything Ukraine currently has access to.
So it kind of hits that sweet spot then. Between being cost-effective but also having really cutting-edge capabilities. Can you walk us through some of those specific technical advantages? Because that must be why they're willing to wait potentially years for these things.
Absolutely. The Gripen E seems almost purpose-built for a contested environment like the one Ukraine faces. We're talking resilience here. Probably the biggest advantage is just its basic design philosophy. It allows it to operate from dispersed locations, relatively short runways.
Like roads even.
Yeah, even sections of highway or less prepared forward bases. That's absolutely huge for survivability compared to jets that need these massive, heavily defended airfields.
Okay, so that makes the jet itself harder to target when it's on the ground. What about when it's up in the air?
Right, so in the air, you've got, maybe three main game changers. First, it's got a really advanced radar system. gives it much better situational awareness compared to current Russian platforms.
Okay.
Second, the internal electronic warfare systems. This is a big one. It means the jet can actively jam enemy radar, defend itself against missile guidance systems.
Without needing extra pods hanging off it.
Exactly. Without relying solely on external pods or just flares and chaff, it makes it inherently more survivable.
So it's not just fast, it's smart, a really intelligent, resilient platform. But what about, the offensive side? Is there a particular missile capability that makes the Gripen E really stand out?
Yes. That brings us to the Meteor air-to-air missile.
Meteor, okay.
This is what could really shift the tactical balance. The Meteor is a beyond visual range missile, exceptional range, very maneuverable. And crucially, the analysis we've seen suggests that using the Meteor allows the Gripen E pilot to engage and shoot down opponents before those opponents can get into range with many of the missiles currently carried by Russian fighters.
Wow. Okay, that capability alone. I can see why you'd prioritize a system that offers that. It flips things, doesn't it? Turns a defensive need into an offensive advantage by letting you dictate the fight from further away. So let me throw this out to you, the listener. Which of those advantages, the ability to operate from rough, short runways, or that long-range medium missile, which one do you think is the biggest difference maker for Ukraine's pilots right now? Let us know.
The power of that kind of range advantage, that's likely why Ukraine is willing to grapple with the next huge hurdle here, the timeline conflict.
Yeah, the timelines are, well, they seem worlds apart. This is where that long-term planning kind of crashes into the immediate reality. Zelenskiy is talking about wanting to receive and start using these jets next year. That means 2026.
Which sounds incredibly ambitious.
Right, because Kristersson, the Swedish PM, being pragmatic, stated that producing and delivering new aircraft, these 100 to 150 jets they're discussing, could realistically take 3 years.
3 years, pushing actual deliveries out to maybe 2028, 2029?
That 3-year gap, it just underscores the huge industrial challenge involved here.
Absolutely. Saab is a capable company. They're increasing capacity, but historically they've only produced about, 280 Gripens total since the mid-90s.
Right.
They're aiming to produce maybe 20 to 30 planes per year at their main plant in Linköping. So delivering 100 new jets, that's a multi-year effort. It's going to significantly stretch their capacity, even factoring in the production they also do in Brazil.
That production reality, it really backs up that 3-year estimate, doesn't it? Which brings us back to that strategic question. If they won't actually arrive for several years, why sign the letter of intent now? Isn't 3 years just too long to wait, too big a gamble?
Well, not necessarily if you accept what seems to be the core idea here. This whole deal looks like strong evidence that Ukraine is actively planning for its post-war air force.
Post-war. So not just for the immediate fight.
Exactly. They aren't ordering, 3 jets to plug a gap next month. They're ordering potentially 150 jets to secure their air sovereignty and their defense capabilities for the next generation. From that perspective, they need to lock in the industrial production slot and the political commitment now, today, even if the actual planes won't be on the ramp for years.
It's certainly optimistic planning, but it also shows a certain confidence maybe in long-term Western industrial support and political backing too. Although Kristersson did mention, didn't he, that they haven't ruled out sending some older Gripen models sooner to kind of bridge that gap.
Yes, that's a key point. He did acknowledge that sending older models, probably the earlier A or C versions, hasn't been ruled out. No decision made, but it's on the table.
So that might offer, a few jets in the meantime? For training, maybe?
Probably. It would give them valuable time to get pilots familiar with the basics of the airframe, the logistics. But those older models, they don't have the advanced radar or that game-changing Meteor capability of the new E model.
So the core focus really remains on that huge order for the new Gripen S.
It seems so.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the financial cliff. The money.
Ah, yes. The multi-billion-dollar question.
Building 150 highly sophisticated fighter jets costs. Well, astronomical sums. And Kristersson was pretty blunt about it. He said significant work is still needed before any actual deal is signed, precisely because financing is the single biggest hurdle.
And this is where the political complexity just goes off the charts. Kristersson mentioned 2 main potential ways to pay for this. First, maybe contributions from allied nations, a coalition of the willing chipping in.
Okay, that seems somewhat conventional, if ambitious.
Right. But the second source he mentioned is far more unprecedented. using frozen Russian assets currently held in Western countries.
Using frozen Russian sovereign assets to buy fighter jets for Ukraine. That sounds legally and financially like a minefield.
It absolutely is.
Why is that so complex? Why can't they just, transfer the funds?
Well, it really boils down to principles like sovereign immunity and concerns about international financial stability. These assets technically belong to the Russian central bank. Just seizing them sets this monumental legal precedent.
Yep.
And other countries might then worry, could our assets be targeted someday in a future conflict? It could potentially destabilize global finance if not handled incredibly carefully. The legal groundwork required to establish that these specific funds can be legitimately repurposed for Ukraine's defense procurement, especially on this kind of massive scale, is incredibly difficult and untested.
Wow. So it sounds like the financial and legal fight over where the money comes from could easily take just as long as the 3 years it takes Saab to actually build the planes.
It certainly could. It's an enormous political lift, a huge bit.
It really suggests this deal isn't just between Ukraine and Sweden then. It needs a comprehensive, multi-year financial agreement involving the wider G7, maybe other allies, just to even get off the ground.
That seems to be the reality, yes.
Now, this focus on the long-term military modernization, that's clearly the main story here. But it is important to remember, like you said earlier, the immediate needs are still there too. They exist alongside this huge planning effort. Just before Zelenskyy arrived in Sweden, he made a quick stop in Oslo, Norway.
That's right. A good reminder of the balancing act they're constantly performing.
Yeah.
While he was in Norway, they secured about 1.5 billion Norwegian crowns. That's close to $150 million US. And that money wasn't for jets or weapons. It was specifically earmarked for buying natural gas.
Natural gas. So keeping the lights on, keeping people warm.
Exactly. Securing electricity and heating for the coming winter. It shows how the West is simultaneously trying to fund immediate survival needs and this decades-long defense modernization project.
It really highlights that two-track strategy, doesn't it? Survival today, security tomorrow. And this Gripen letter of intent, it really feels like a monumental moment in that long-term security plan, laying down the industrial base, the technical standards for the next generation of their Air Force.
And if you connect all those threads we've discussed, the industrial limits at Saab, that 3-year minimum timeline, the need for these completely unprecedented financial solutions like using frozen assets, you see this commitment not really as an immediate win, but as a massive strategic gamble.
A gamble that Western support holds steady.
Exactly. Ukraine is betting that the political will of its Western allies will stay absolutely solid for at least the 3 years it's going to take Saab to build these 100-plus incredibly sophisticated aircraft. And maybe here's the final thought for you to really chew on. This is a letter of intent, right? To build a future Air Force funded by, essentially, future financial mechanisms that haven't been fully worked out yet. So the big question isn't really if the Gripen E is a superior fighter jet. It probably is, for their needs. The real question is whether this massive, forward-looking commitment, which depends entirely on solving that huge legal puzzle of frozen assets, and on maintaining consistent Western political support year after year, can actually survive the unpredictable nature of future conflict, shifting domestic politics in allied countries, all through a multi-year industrial program.
That level of political and financial constancy, that feels like the biggest variable of all in this entire equation. You've been listening to The Military Point. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time.